So thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited to gather today and talk with you about building a budget for a building campaign. My name is Sandra Davis. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the founder and president of Donorly. We work with small and mid-sized nonprofits at moments of growth and change. And building a building and planning for a building is absolutely a moment of growth and change. I get really excited when we work with organizations who are doing this for the first time, because it really means you're leveling up and you're managing through exciting new milestones. And it's just a really exciting time. Before I started the company, I was an in-house fundraiser for a number of performing arts nonprofits. I managed a number of building campaigns during that time, and it was just always so exciting. I really loved it, and I got the bug. So this is a primary focus of Donorly, to work with small and mid-sized nonprofits on those first-time campaigns. And I'm really just so pleased to have a fellow consultant here today with me, Jackie McLaughlin. She has a deep expertise and knowledge in this area. She is a numbers person. I love a numbers person, and we're going to have a good talk about this and hopefully kind of make those numbers come alive for you and help you understand what that's all about. But Jackie, I want to throw it over to you and let you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thanks, Sandra. My name is Jackie McLaughlin. As Sandra said, I started out 100 years ago, or as I say, when the earth cooled. I started out when the earth cooled in this profession, working for one of the top 4 largest accounting firms. Bobbed and weaved my way through the accounting profession, and now I'm with Chasen & Company, and we cater exclusively to not-for-profits. So what we found is that we knew not-for-profit accounting is very unique. We found not a lot of accountants have this experience, and not-for-profits need the help. So we don't audit, we don't do tax returns, we just make your records in compliance with accounting authoritative guidance so that you can get a clean audit and your tax preparer can do what they need to do with confidence. So I am very happy to be here. I would encourage all of you to put all of your preconceived notions about CPAs on the shelf during this presentation. Don't glaze over. I'm going to use, as I like to say, words that normal people use. I don't use accounting words. So,
whew, I'm so glad to hear that.
Yeah.
All right. So as a reminder, this call is being recorded. Again, turn on closed captioning if you need it by navigating to the meetings control toolbar and click show captions. And we'll be selecting a series of questions. Some of those were submitted in advance. We're going to spend about 10 minutes on each question, hopefully a lively discussion. Feel free to ask clarifying questions in the chat. We'd love for this to be a great give and take. If you didn't have time to submit a question beforehand, no worries, just put it into the chat. Our colleague, Izzy Wayner, raise your hand, Izzy, is here to kind of moderate for us. She'll be keeping track of the chat, and she's going to help us work our way through the questions as we go through the hour. And I'm really looking forward to it. So let's take our first question.
Great. Very excited to be here with everyone. And as Jackie said, to put all of our preconceived notions and potential fears about budgets and numbers to the side, possibly just momentarily. But with that said, we're going to first start by diving into where do you start? I think this is applicable and one of the broadest questions I could possibly pose to you, Sandra and Jackie, but more narrowly, how can organizations not have that fear that comes with staring at a blank document, or in this instance, a blank budget sheet? And where do you even begin? So with all of that said, Sandra, I think I'll pass it over to you to speak a little broader, because I think where do you begin? Is there even steps before that to get to the budget considerations? But yeah, lots to explore in that couple words of how do we start?
It's a big question in a lot of ways. So by the time an organization comes to us and they're ready to embark on fundraising, usually they've taken a few steps if they're building a building. They've engaged an architect, they've, they've come up with a plan, they've secured their land, they've talked with a contractor, they've maybe arranged with somebody to manage the project, and they have the budget for the project itself, perhaps, because they've been given a quote. They've sat in a boardroom and they've talked about if they want to make this big change for their organization, embark on this big fundraising campaign, and considered what that would mean for their organization. They've maybe done a formal vote to say, yes, we want to go forward. We need this for our organization. So by the time an organization comes to us, they've already taken those steps. Maybe they have renderings of the building itself. They're excited about what might come in the future. They have a number they want to fundraise for, and they're ready to engage with a consultant to help them work their way through that. So that's usually where we start, but all those steps need to be taken really before you can do any fundraising or too much fundraising, except from your very closest folks, usually those people who are sitting in the boardroom and know that this is needed. And one of the things that often happens when people come to us at that stage is they know what the budget is for the building itself, but they haven't considered what the budget needs to be for the process of raising the money and for what it might mean for your organization after you've built the building and open the doors. So Jackie, I'd love for you to kind of jump in and talk about just how do you start building that budget? What do you need to know?
Thanks, Sandra. So what probably nobody wants to hear is that before you can really start building your budget for the capital campaign, you need to be intimately familiar with your budget as it exists anyway. And I'm actually going to go a step further, not just with your budget, but also with your actual performance results. So to take away the fear, and that's where people get overwhelmed because they think, oh, all this accounting stuff, I don't want to deal with this. So what I like to do is take away the fear of that. All of us, once we leave our parents' homes, we have to pay our own rent, we have utilities, we have food bills, insurance, all of that. So we all, at some level, get involved in numbers, and really your business numbers, whether that be a nonprofit or whether that be for-profit, your business numbers mirror what you do in your own private life with your own household numbers. So hopefully all of you in your household have some idea in total of how much it costs you to live every month. You know your rent or mortgage, you know round numbers, your utility costs, your food, your gas, your transportation, whatever else you have. Hopefully you know that. And you hopefully know what your income is every month so that in your personal life, you know whether you're running at a deficit or a surplus. And we all like to run in our personal life at a minimum of break even, hopefully a surplus, so that we can put savings aside. This is all very true in a business as well. So in your nonprofit, and nonprofits are businesses, even though they're nonprofit, they're still businesses. In your nonprofit, you should be intimately familiar with your rent, your salaries, your payroll taxes, your utilities, all of those basic costs that you need to pay just to keep your lights on. So it really starts there. To go off on a little bit of a tangent, as I warned Izzy and Sandra I would do, just like in your personal life, you like to, if you can, you like to put money away every single month in your personal life for an emergency fund, and you like to put money away for retirement. Your business life is no different than that. If your nonprofit can do it, it should be putting a little bit away every month for emergencies. Your HVAC goes out, whatever, your insurance bill goes up more than you thought it would. And you should put away for your business's retirement, which is what a lot of you like to refer to as endowment. But getting back to the question at hand, which is how do you build your budget for a capital campaign? You can't do that without being intimately familiar with your existing numbers without the capital campaign. And then, as Sandra said, usually your capital campaign is for buildings. So you know your costs for your architect, your construction, your design fees, all of that. You've gotten quotes for it. But here's what you have to do. You have to take all of those quotes together and increase them by a minimum of 10%, because it's always going to cost more than you think it's going to cost. And then I would even argue increase that by another 5%, because you're going to have change orders come through that you didn't anticipate having come through. And then also in your mind, if you think it's going to take 3 years, you probably need to double that time, because even though you think you're going to start building and call it 2020, or I'm sorry, finish building in 2027, that's not going to happen. You're probably not going to finish building until 2029. So you have to have a realistic regardless of what your contractor says, you have to have a realistic expectation of when you're going to finish building. And that's important for determining that budget, because it's not only going to be all the architects, engineering, construction costs. Yes, yes, yes. Again, with another 10 to 20% added to that for change orders, and the fact that it will take longer and prices will go up and all of that. So take those hard costs, add 10 to 20% on them. But then, to Sandra's point, there's going to be a cost in raising money for that capital campaign. That cost may be a consultant that you hire to help you raise that money, which has to be built into the capital campaign. Or, and this is what we see with our clients, or the organization takes its existing fundraising people and retargets them to the capital campaign, which is fine. But then you have to take into account that now those existing fundraising people aren't raising the normal money they would raise every year, because they're raising money for your capital campaign. So that budget has to include how much contribution, if you're using internal people, how much contributions are you losing because those internal people are refocused? And then also you got to take those internal people and include them in your capital budget, which yes means their salaries, but don't forget, you have benefits and taxes on top of those salaries. So a rough rule of thumb is to take their salary and add 30% on top of that to cover benefits, taxes, workers' comp, health insurance, all the kinds of things that you have to cover for employees. So you're looking at their salaries times 1.3. If they make, I'm going to pick it out of the air because it's a round number and I can't do math without a spreadsheet. If they make $100,000 a year, you're looking at $130,000 that it would cost you to move these people into building the capital campaign.
And
don't
then
forget,
you need to build out, their increased salary over those years too. So
yes, absolutely.
it's a lot to think about, isn't it?
It is an absolute process. And the best way to start the process is just to, I call it brain drain. Brain drain on a spreadsheet of all the possible costs you can think of, like the salary, like the benefits on top of the salary, the architect, the design, the construction. Brain drain it all on, accountants, we love Excel, on an Excel spreadsheet, and then you can start filling in your numbers. I would rather have you include more things, i.e. that's the brain drain, than less things, because I would rather have you thinking you have to raise $10 million when really you only need 9. If you raise the 10, you're going to be better off.
Good.
And by the way, what I did not mention and people forget, insurance too. And I don't mean health insurance. I mean the insurance that you'll need for the construction process.
Yeah, that's true. Our rule of thumb around how much the cost of raising the money is roughly 10% of your full budget. So that includes consulting, that includes the materials you need to create to promote the campaign. That includes additional marketing. Maybe you're hiring a PR rep, maybe you're hiring lobbyists. All of those pieces begin to add up over the course of the campaign. And you want to use the campaign as a moment to really elevate your brand and your presence. So, you know, if you can allocate enough money towards building that brand, maybe you need a brand refresh, maybe you need to brand the campaign itself. Maybe you need to add additional events and parties so you can grow your community while you're building out your building, so that you have people to, you know, show up after your building is built. So there's a lot to think about, and it's really a great opportunity to do some marketing, brand building, PR opportunities. All of those things can be packed into a campaign. And it doesn't serve your organization in the long term to skimp on those things. It's just, it's a moment that you need to kind of lean into. And I do like round numbers like 10 million or 20 million or 30 million. Those are great numbers to raise against. They look really nice on a goal announcement. So, you know, level up a little bit, and hopefully your community can handle that level of contribution. But that will help you out in the long run if you overraise, as long as you're, you know, meeting donor intent by using the money in the way that was intended.
So Sandra, let me play off what you just said for a second, because Sandra just said something really, really important. She just said, as long as you're using the money in the way that the donor intended it. So this is one of those unique nonprofit things that a ton of accountants and people in nonprofits don't understand. The unique nonprofit thing is that you are collecting contributions or soliciting contributions, and oftentimes a donor is telling you how to use that money, and you don't have a choice about it. You have to use it the way they tell you to use it. And that's, I promised I wouldn't talk accounting, but I'm going to just a little bit. That's called restricted money. So when a donor tells you how to use some money, it's restricted and you can only use it for those purposes. I'm going to give you a very broad example, and then I'm going to kick it over to Sandra because she's the expert in this area. As an accountant, when we are determining or helping you determine what's restricted and what's not restricted, we'll ask to read the documentation that you have from the donor that dictates how the donor wants this used. So I know I have a lot of theater people, but I use a little sports analogy. So if somebody's given you money to buy baseball uniforms, all you can do is buy baseball uniforms. You can't buy anything else. So as the nonprofit, oftentimes you can steer that. And instead of asking the donor for money to buy baseball uniforms, you can say, hey, donor, will you support my baseball program? Which means you could buy bats, balls, shoes, plates, home plates, or whatever that's all called, the sand, all of that stuff. So you're really better off broad brushing that ask, so you have more flexibility. And that's Sandra's wheelhouse. I'm kicking over to her.
Yeah, that's good. It's so important, and it really is all in the messaging and how you're describing your campaign. So, you know, oftentimes when people start a building campaign or even a campaign for a specific program, they're really thinking about exactly what they need to fund. But your messaging around a campaign can be both about the construction itself or the renovation itself and the programs that are going to happen once you open your doors, or the maintenance that will need to happen after you open your doors. So you can construct the description of your campaign in such a way that it gives you a little bit of flexibility there. And I will also say that there are times that, like, donor intent is really important, but there are times you can go back to a donor if they've given you a certain kind of gift and ask them to unrestrict it or to restrict it in another way. So there is, as long as you have a close relationship with those donors, relationships are all there really is when you're doing fundraising. So keep those relationships really strong, and then you can have those honest conversations. If you get into a pickle around you've asked only for the uniforms and you need to go back and ask for the baseballs, as long as you have a good relationship, that's an easy conversation. You just need to document it and you're all good.
Well, and I want to emphasize that point too, Sandra. You have to document it, because when all of you come to somebody like me and you say, hey, the donor said I could unrestrict this and use it, as I say, to keep the lights on, I'm going to say, not unless you show me some paperwork. And oftentimes that paperwork, and I'm going to go off on one of my soapboxes here. Accountants are not in the business to interfere with you and getting money. We're not in the business to do that. But to some extent, we do need the documentation. So for example, we have a client who has a generous donor, and that donor doesn't like to do paperwork. And we actually our company had a heart-to-heart with the auditors of this organization because the auditors wanted to see the paperwork. And our heart-to-heart was, this is a generous donor, and this gentleman doesn't like to do paperwork. And if we ask him to do paperwork, he may say, well, forget it. I'm not going to give you my money, which is not anything that any of us want. So the compromise that we came to was that the fundraising person for that organization just sent an email to the donor. Hey, Fred, this is just to confirm that you're willing to give us $10,000 to be used to build a building. Please confirm. And Fred responded to the email. Obviously, I'm making up the Fred name, and just said, confirmed. Yep. And that was it. And that paperwork was good enough. The auditors were happy. We were happy. The client was happy. The donor's happy. Everybody's happy. So it just needs to be some kind of documentation.
That's great. That's great advice. I've used that system so many times. It's easy for everybody. Izzy, what else have we got to talk about?
Yeah, you all were just starting to touch upon this, but a lot of this, you know, in the early stages, you're putting a roadmap in place and a foundation in place to prepare yourself for unexpected changes, expenses, etc. So we'd love to talk a little bit about contingency and what that, again, preparing for the unexpected and then the unexpected happening and preparing again, what that cycle can look like during an active campaign. And that's, you know, a focus area that we received some questions about. And I also just want to acknowledge, Michael, that I saw your question in the chat, and I think it's a great one. And it seems, you know, we're going to arc from point A to point Z of a campaign, and then we'll be able to spend some time on your big picture question about what it means to see that campaign into, you know, operational expenses moving forward.
So to answer the contingency, I want to talk about renovating my kitchen. So years ago, all of us can relate to this. That's what I'm saying. Business stuff is no different than personal stuff. Years ago, I renovated my kitchen, and the contractor gave me an estimate. I don't remember the number. It was, again, back when the earth cooled. So let's say it was $20,000. The contractor was telling me it was going to cost. And I was younger, and I hadn't learned these lessons that I've learned now with some years and a kitchen renovation under my belt. So I took the contractor at face value that it was going to cost $20,000. Of course, it did not. It cost $30,000. The contractor told me it would be done in a month. I believed that person. It was not done in a month. It was done in 4 months. And if anybody on this call has been through a kitchen renovation or a bathroom renovation and you've relied on somebody else to do it, or even yourself, you know that the costs you planned are never what they turn out to be. So again, you should plan, in my opinion, at least 10% over what it is they tell you it's going to cost. Add another 10% to that. And if they tell you it's going to take 3 years, in your head, add another 1 year to 2 years on top of that 3 year. And if you really want to be conservative, which I would be, add 20% onto that cost that they give you. Because even if they don't go that over budget, you've got extra money then. And to Sandra's point, if you've worked with a professional to write those gift agreements, you can use that extra money to maintain the building afterward, or whatever you need to do with it. Did I answer that question, Izzy? I go off on tangents.
No, that was great. As you were talking, the other thing that was coming to mind for me is thinking about past campaigns I've worked on where the budget needed to be increased because those contingencies didn't exist or didn't get covered. So just from the standpoint of keeping your organization motivated towards the fundraising goal, it makes it harder to have to go back to increase your budget, your expense budget time and time again. Your board continues, starts to get disillusioned or annoyed. Your donors are, not happy that you haven't planned well. So I would say, the rule of thumb of, under promising, in this case, building a budget that maybe is over the amount that you'll need to raise, and then over delivering. It would be really nice to say, we actually didn't need to raise 10 million. We only needed to raise 9.75. Boy, didn't we all, plan well and budget well. It's a lot better end story than having to go from 5 to 7 to 8 to 9, continuing to ask the board to change those numbers. Because you want to keep, I think one of the most important aspects of a campaign is to keep the energy high, to keep everybody motivated, to keep everybody feeling like you're winning. And that all starts in your boardroom, and then it all starts with your closest donors who are going to be paying attention to all of this.
And I would encourage you not to believe what your contractor's saying, and not because they lie. They're not intentionally doing that. They're very optimistic people, and they give you prices and timelines that are best case scenarios. And there are always problems. And for example, I know here we are in 2024, contractors, some of them are still suffering from supply chain issues that go back to the COVID times. So there are certain contractors whose supply chain has not recovered from that. So if you need certain types of doorknobs on your building, and your contractor's supplier is still having troubles because of hangover from COVID, that's going to delay their time. And they're always planning for the best case. So don't keep asking them, just take what they say, and in your head, add to both the cost and the timing of it, and plan for what you think.
Yeah, that's Jackie and Sandra, actually, Michael had an interesting riff on that question when it comes to some vendor relationships. So Michael, I want to invite you to come off mute if you want to elaborate upon that specific question a little further.
Okay, thank you, and enjoying this webinar, or whatever we want to call it. Just a question on your personal recommendations of dealing with a contractor and going into a guaranteed maximum price contract versus what we're talking about now, where we're going in blind and adding a 10% contingency and hoping that we're not going to use that 10%, and there's not going to be this unforeseen crazy expense that is added on. Could you speak a little bit about the pros and cons of both choices?
Well, so I'm going to throw a question back to you. Have you ever watched any HGTV shows?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
I actually met Chip and
Joanna.
Yes, I met him, got pictures. Yep.
Love it or list it, because that's okay.
Yes.
So, from Hillary's perspective, she's always going back to the owners and going, oh my gosh, we didn't know this was going to happen and we need more money.
Yes.
So in the commercial construction world, that's called a change order.
Yes.
So when you talk about guaranteed maximum contracts, and again, let me set my frame of reference here. Accountants are, and if you guys are familiar with Winnie the Pooh references, we're the Eeyores of the world. So if the sky is going to fall, we're going to be the first one to tell you it's going to fall. So I'm coming at this from a Eeyore frame of reference here. But in my experience, the guaranteed maximum prices, okay, but then they blanket you in change orders. So it's still going to cost more than they think it's going to be. That said, it's also my experience, whether you call it a guaranteed contract or not, they'll usually give you an estimate of what it's going to cost. And of course, if you can get a guaranteed maximum, of course do that. But understand it's going to cost more than that because they're going to paper you in change orders.
Right, but it won't exceed the guaranteed maximum, and they built in contingencies. At least, the contracts that I have, if it goes over the guaranteed maximum price, even with the change order, we're not liable for it. It may dig into our contingency money, but it will never go over the guaranteed maximum price in terms of the construction cost, not the soft cost.
Yeah, and if you obviously you've gotten contracts like that, so that's terrific because
but that's the only, so that's my only experience. So my question is, would I be better off not doing a GMP and going with an overall construction budget and just build in a 10% contingency? Would you be better off?
From an accounting perspective, I would say that guaranteed maximum, that with the caveat that change orders added cannot exceed that guaranteed maximum. The accountant's always going to tell you, oh yeah, that's awesome, because now we have the known.
Okay.
Accountants don't like the unknown. From a quality perspective, and this is just from being a person, not an accountant, you have to ask yourself, to meet that guaranteed maximum, could quality potentially suffer?
Yes.
I don't know that answer.
That's yes, and I've experienced that.
So sometimes, we all know this, again, when we're shopping at Home Depot for a tool, sometimes the cheapest tool isn't always the best tool because it's going to break more quickly, or, you have quality issues, you're replacing it, and you ended up spending more anyway.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
And yes, I do shop for tools at Home Depot.
Me too.
There you go. Well, as we're sort of moving through this journey, I do want to invite Shannon to come off mute and share a little bit about your organization's goals, because while she makes reference to not building a space, it's about buying a space, and still a sizable investment that requires a lot of planning and consideration. So, and just sort of a different semblance of how a capital project can come to be.
Thank you. So yeah, we've been renting our space forever, and it's a sizable chunk of our budget, after payroll. And it's still, our staff has grown. It's still not necessarily, the right size for our organization, a lot of sharing offices. So we live, it's a small town that we are based in. And so we keep an eye out for things to be available. And the reason I'm attending this is that, we have an endowment, but we're not really working toward purchasing a space. We'd like to, in the rare event that something comes along that suits us, be ready to try to purchase it. And I don't know the options for getting a mortgage for a space, but at some point we'd like to work toward having that investment instead of just paying rent.
That's great, Shannon. Thank you. I mean, I'd love to speak about the fundraising implications there, but Jackie, do you want to talk a little bit about any kind of financing for this kind of thing you've seen?
So I love this, Sandra, because Sandra just introduced the importance of trying to get your arms around the costs before you throw it at fundraising, because definitely I'm going to put some words in Sandra's mouth. I think she would tell you that you're going to be more successful when you provide your fundraising team with very clear goals. Is
100%? Yes.
So Shannon, in your question, the first thing you need to think about with a space you want to buy is, what is the going rate for a space like that? And sometimes that's as easy to get a feel for as Googling it and seeing what kind of commercial property that's consistent with what you're looking for, what it's going for now. Again, depending on your timing and you know how real estate's going crazy, you'll want to increase. If you're going to buy it in the next year, it's probably a fair price. If you don't think you can buy it for 5 years, frankly, you probably want to talk to a commercial real estate professional and figure out how much anybody's crystal ball, how much that pricing is going to go up. Secondly, in all likelihood, if you do find a place and buy it, you'll want to do upfits to it. So that's going, or tenant improvements, leasehold improvements. I understand it wouldn't be a lease or a tenant, but you would want, I'm just using different vernacular. You would want to fix that up so that it can accommodate your needs. So again, you're going to have to get your arms around with a probably from a construction professional, ballpark costs for how much it would cost to upfit that particular space that you're looking at. Of course, there's always closing costs. We all know this from buying our homes. If we think we're buying a $200,000 home and we're coming to the table with $20,000 down, suddenly at closing, we need 30,000, not 20,000, because all of the closing costs, the title fees, the little bit of property taxes you have to pay in advance, all that stuff that's on our lender's list. Suddenly now we thought we had to go with 20 grand in cash. We have to go with 30 grand in cash. So you'll want to factor all that into the costs, which a mortgage professional can help you estimate. If you're looking at a $5 million building, and I'm making this up, a mortgage professional might say, it's going to be 10% closing costs or whatever they're going to say. So at this point, you've gotten a real estate commercial real estate professional involved, a loan professional, if you're going to go the loan route, and a construction person to get a feel for the upfits. To your question about a loan, that's going to go to your financial history. So bankers lend based on two things: the value of your collateral, which would be the building itself. They're going to lend based on the value of your collateral, and they're going to lend based on your ability to pay them back. And your ability to pay them back is going to 100% be determined by your current financials and your historical financials. It also may require, depending on the size of your loan, you have to build into the budget that now maybe your lender is going to require something called a review or an audit annually that has to be done by an outside CPA firm. And that's going to run you, I don't even know how much, depending on the size of your organization, but easily it's going to cost you a minimum of $20,000 a year during the life of this loan if your lender requires that. So it's easy to think to yourself, oh, I know I'm going to have closing costs and purchase price and property taxes and all of that. It's easy to think that. What's often forgotten is, oh my goodness, my lender at a minimum is going to require financial statements on a periodic basis. Now I need not just a bookkeeper, I need an accountant who can produce financial statements for me. Oh, and if my lender requires a review or an audit, which has to be done by an outside CPA firm, now I've got additional costs to get that done and the preparation for it. So there's admin cost to support your lender as well. And finally, while I'm brain draining on all of you, back to the property tax issue, some states, and this is state specific, do not require nonprofits to pay property taxes. So we have gotten involved with some clients who've come to us and they're paying either personal property taxes or real property taxes. And we'll do the investigation on their particular state because we are nationwide. We'll look at their state and go, you don't have to pay this. And to get out of paying, or not get out of paying it, but to exercise your right to not have to pay it because you're a nonprofit, let's fill out some paperwork and file it with the state or your local county or whoever you need to file it with, and get you an exemption from paying those kinds of taxes. Just a little bit of a tangent, but
That's a good one. So, ideally, to avoid all of those costs and headaches, you want to raise all the money in order to, purchase this building or find this office space that you can purchase. I would say, one piece of advice I have for you, Shannon, is that you might, all those professionals that Jackie listed that you might need, see if you can find a few of those people that are interested in being on your board. So if you have a commercial real estate person on your board, that is going to help you immensely in navigating all of those things. So that might be a good first step in exploring this. The other thing I would say, I want to talk a little bit about the stage you're in from a fundraising perspective, because you might have a few people who are really close to your organization, who are really invested stakeholders, who would be willing to give you, a gift that's like seed money gift. So it'll help pay for the cost of doing this exploration, hiring the people you need, and being ready to have a down payment. But in order to engage the wider community in fundraising for a project like this, you need to be a little farther along so they can see what's happening, and you need to be able to tell the story of why this is important for your organization. How not only why it's important from the expense side of your budget, which is great for you, but doesn't necessarily inspire donations, but why improving the expense side of your budget is actually going to allow you to do new things, expand your programs, help the community, do, ocean cleanup. I don't know what Friends of the Sun wants to, but whatever it is that you do, maybe it unlocks some money in your annual budget to do more of what you do and to serve your mission. Maybe it provides a meeting place for people in the community. So whatever it is that the building or the new office space does for you that helps you serve the community better, that expands on your mission, is really the communication you want to have at the forefront. That's what you want to talk about, not, plumbing and heating systems or whatever. But really,
Our current space is not handicap accessible, so that is
So-
one of the big reasons that we've been,
that's important. Yeah.
having another space for a long time.
That's important, and there could be specific funding just for that. There's a variety of ways that you can explore that idea. But I also think that's a great thing to tell your donors and your board. But I'd say see if you can find a few people that can help you with that and get them on your board and ask for their support and wisdom and expertise as a starting point. Good luck.
Yeah, thank you all. That was great.
I think Michael had held his hand up a couple minutes ago.
Yes, Jackie, you mentioned the independent financial audit for the bank. If we currently have auditors that come every year, would that satisfy the bank, or is it a separate?
Actually, thank you for bringing this up, Michael. You're absolutely correct, because some states for the charitable solicitation license require an audit.
Okay,
And so if the bankers require an audit, it's the same thing.
it's the same. So we wouldn't have to do an addition.
Correct.
Beautiful. Thank you.
And Michael, I might ask if you want to stay off mute, because I think as we're rounding out this hour, we do want to spend a little time about that transition. So you've seen a Capitol building campaign to fruition and what it looks like to move things from a specific building project budget structure into an organization's then continuing and expanded general operating budget. And what that transition point looks like, let's say, out of a campaign into more general operations. And I know, Michael, you posed a question there in terms of some industry standards that I think Jackie and Sandra can elaborate upon, and then also just round out a bit more about what it looks like to come to that other side of completing such a large scale project.
Yeah, so just to expand on that question, we had a very successful first phase capital campaign, the buildings that you see in the background here. And we are now looking for our second phase, which would complete the campus transformation. And some of the feedback that I received just recently, and Sandra, we can talk about this, in terms of communication planning. One very, very smart man who happens to sit on the board of regents for MIT is worried that we're falling into the university trap of, beautiful buildings, expansion, and how does revenue, tuition fees going to cover the long-term maintenance and facilities costs. And he's going to look at financials and give me some ideas and suggestions. And I'm just curious, both on a fundraising perspective and an industry perspective, when you build new facilities, is there an industry percentage that we should have in mind in building the business plan moving forward that is typical of covering $100 million building, a $2 million building, whatever it might be, or maybe there isn't? And then on a fundraising perspective, I think that could be very attractive for future sustainability. And how would you go about targeting that in a campaign?
I'm really interested to hear what you have to say on this, Jackie. I think my first instinct would be to build that out for each individual organization, because if you think of a museum, for example, the level of number of security guards you might need for a museum is going to be much higher than another kind of facility. So I do think it's a little specific to your facility. And it's worth maybe getting that expertise to have somebody look at it. I'm sure there are specific standards around how often you need to, re-roof the building and those kinds of basic things, but there's so much more about operating a building than just maintaining the actual structure.
That's a very good point. I didn't even think about the staffing. I was just thinking maintenance.
And Michael, to Sandra's point, in a previous life, I worked for a private college, and we had somebody on staff, and I don't really know his title, but essentially he was head of all things maintenance, repair, the whole thing. And he had a 5-year schedule that he would give me as the CFO at that time, a 5-year schedule of what he needed to replace. And this was a much older college. It's not nice and shiny and new like yours is. But, over time, that you have to replace your HVAC. I'm making this up, every 5 years or whatever the magic number is. So he was such a qualified professional at this, and he had such a good handle on the entire campus that he had a whole spreadsheet of what significant things needed to be replaced when. So at budget time, part of our budgeting process was looking at his estimations of what we were going to have to replace or repair. I shouldn't just say replace, or repair, or just maintain. Sometimes the maintenance every 2 or 3 years on certain systems were expensive. So I'm going to echo what Sandra said. And additionally, I'm going to tee her up for something else. Sometimes it's nice to start an endowment campaign exactly for that purpose. So
Got it.
Go ahead, Sandra, take it from there.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I have so many sad stories that I can come up with. I've heard in the news, I've heard over the years about organizations that, I think this was what he was probably referring to, have built a shiny new building. It's beautiful. You're ready to open the doors, and you've really exhausted your donor community. And so when you open the doors, your light bill is higher, your heating bill is higher, maybe you've saved money in other ways, but generally it costs more money. And generally you need more staff because you're, expanding your program. That's why you built a new building. And so to really, to get back to an ER mentality, perhaps, to really look at what is going to happen after you build the building. It's so hard. It's so hard for us, for me as a fundraiser. I want to focus on the you know, the 10 million, the 50 million I want to raise, and I want to get there and complete the goal and have the ribbon cutting and celebrate and not think about anything after that. But there's
right.
a lot to think about after that. And if you don't think about it, it is to your peril. So an endowment, I think, is a great idea. You know, again, thinking of your campaign as something that includes a maintenance fund of some kind. Really having the board kind of come to grips to what the actual costs of the new building is, so that they can help you, or they can come together as a group and grapple with how those costs are going to be managed. And you know, thinking about that as much ahead of time as you can, so that you're not caught in the situation where you can't afford the building you built. And there's dramatic stories about that, and it's just heartbreaking. And nobody wants to be in that situation.
I agree. And is that, you know, projecting the future cost of a building, is that something that the construction team can help you with? Who would be like an expert? You know, yes, you have your internal team, but this is a new building. How do you even begin to project something like that?
So in my example of our facility, I'm going to call him a facilities person.
Yeah.
He was that good that if we had had a new building, he could help me project the costs, even to the utilities point of view. I mean, he had spent some money on, again, this is construction. It's way out of my wheelhouse.
Yeah.
But he had spent some money on some really fancy software that tracked. And again, this is a college, so you had dorms and things like that.
Yeah.
He had this software that tracked exactly how much electricity was being used by building every month out of the year. So when we did summer school, we had to factor, and I live in a very hot, humid area. So we had to factor in that air conditioning was going to be a lot more expensive in the summer with our summer school people than it was in the fall or the spring. And he had software that he was able to tell me all of that information. So I think you need a really talented,
expert,
good facilities person.
And I think we're like right in that transition period of going from a mom and pop small to this big campus and, you know, more of a corporation, and trying to find a person like that you can afford is very, very hard. So internally, I don't know if we have that expertise and knowledge. So it sounds like we would have to get some kind of a consultant, or maybe go back to your suggestion of a different board member to join that has expertise in that area.
Yeah.
To help.
And your general contractor may be able to recommend somebody as a consultant as well.
That's a good idea.
That's a great idea.
Okay, thank you. They're very helpful.
It's a great idea. Okay, so we're heading on to 1:56 right now, according to my clock. So I feel like we could talk for another hour, but I'm going to be very strict about staying within the hour of our hot seat coaching today. So I just love if folks have any takeaways, if they could just throw them in the chat. Obviously, this is all about planning and thinking ahead and getting that Excel spreadsheet out. But I just love to hear people's takeaways. And while you're putting those takeaways in the chat, I just want to give Jackie an opportunity to kind of let us know how to get in touch with her and her company, and I'll wrap up with Donerly's information.
Thanks, Sandra. So we are on the web and it's back in my background here, but Chazen and A&D on the web, but chazenandcompany.com. And I'm sure that Izzy has our contact information, so she can provide that as well. On our website, you'll find all kinds of free educational resources. And again, we cater specifically to nonprofits. So it's all nonprofit unique blogs, white papers, video information, YouTubes. So it's all on our website at chazenandandcompany.com.
I will attest that is a very, very useful resource. You've got a lot of good information there. And feel free to go to Donorly's blog as well, donorly.com. We've got a lot of information on our website as well. You can follow us at @_Donorly on any social. And I'm on LinkedIn at Sandra Davis Donorly. I'm going to let Izzy follow up with that information in the chat, as well as we will send an email with a recording of today's session, and we'll send you all of that information. Feel free to reach out to either one of us if you have any other questions. This is a, really complex topic, and something that, deserves a lot of contemplation, conversation, expertise from a variety of different areas. So anyway, I hope we got people started thinking about whatever project they're working on or in the midst of, and we're here to help.
Excellent.
All right. So, and I just want to quickly, the takeaways, always budget more time than money. What else have we got here? Great way to get an idea on how to get started. I'm glad you're feeling motivated, Laura. That's awesome. Anyway, thank you all for joining us on a Sunday, or not a Sunday, on a summer Friday. Sometimes a summer
It's
Friday
Friday,
feels like a
don't rush
Sunday.
it.
Summer Friday feels like a Sunday some days. So anyway, I'm glad you could join us. We do this every couple of months. We always have a new topic, so keep a lookout. We'll definitely be emailing you and sharing on social. Jackie, thanks again. So much knowledge. I really appreciate you, and thanks everybody for coming.
Thank you. Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.